welcome. I am going to show you a design using an orchid, using a plant. Because if you're unable to go shopping at the moment, the likelihood is that you could possibly, when you're sending somebody out for the bread and milk, ask them to grab you an orchid plant. I think that's even safe for the son to grab, the nephew, the neighbour. Even if they don't know what it is, I think you could probably explain it fairly easily. But we're going to go a little bit different with the plant. We're going to, well, shall I show you? Let me show you a little bit more closely before we go on to what we're doing. The thing with Phalaenopsis orchids is they are epiphytic plants. So what do I mean by that? I mean that they don't need the soil. Let's get that crunchy cellophane away. They don't need the soil that they come in. The pot that they arrive in and that they're sold in is purely to keep them upright, to put them in a pot cover. But actually, if we think about how they grow, nestled up in crooks of trees, what happens is they have these orchid air roots hanging down and taking the moisture from the atmosphere. So we're going to utilise that with this design. Let's just pop that carefully back down there as we get on to what we're going to sit it on. And that is an oasis sphere or a foam sphere ball. And you can see I've just whooshed, cut the bottom off a little bit. I'm going to sit it on just a little bit of foam card. You could use a plastic picnic plate, anything you like really. The reason I'm doing that is because I am going to be sitting it onto another container which we'll come onto in just a moment. But I actually don't want the container to get wet. So I've soaked this sphere quite well, and from here on in we're going to be keeping it fairly moist but not sodden, because the orchids don't need that. They just need a little bit of moisture constantly and they'll be very, very happy. So using the moss, you can see I've covered its top. Let's go around the side. So hunting you will find with the moss, or get hold of it commercially. If you didn't want to use moss, you could use fabric, you could use cotton wool balls. You could go off in different tangents with this, you really could. It's your design, so you do what you want with it. I'm a country girl, so I do like the natural moss myself. Let me just show you what I'm using here, because I've just taken some floristry wire, cut it into sections and folded it to make little hairpins. Equally, I could use real wire and go around it to keep our moss in place. I could use string. I could use wool. I don't know if you've seen the cocodiums that are very popular. That's a technique where you're just actually wrapping a root ball on compost in moss. This is a little bit different from that. There we are. I think this is my last hole here. Obviously, when you do this, you can take your time over it. I mentioned about using the wire or the string or the wool, and you would just do that by wrapping it around and around, like so. So if you were to get a larger sphere, you may just want to cut it in half, and then you've got two halves if you wanted 2 orchid plants, or half to do something else with. If you have got a smaller one, you might just want to take a little less off the bottom. The choice is yours. So let's just go round, I think, one more time down the bottom, back. Let's see if I can find the original section. I can. So let's just twist that together and off we go. Right, well now I've made a lovely mess. I think I'm fairly safe to take this away. This is the plate that I'm going to be displaying it on. So I'm now going to transfer that over. Right, here we are then. So I could get the scissors out and trim the moss back, but I think that's okay as it is. So we're now going to take our Phalaenopsis orchid, and what we want to do is get the roots nice and happy with sitting against the moss sphere here. And then let's pop those sticks down and in. So remembering that the roots are going to be taking up the moisture from the moss, from the sphere. So it all helps one another and works together. We've got some very friendly roots here. There we are. There we go. Now we can. So if you've got orchid plants at home that have been in a pot for a while, just cutting off some roots that aren't so happy there. But if you've got an orchid plant at home in a pot cover and it's got all of its roots hanging over the top, you've got a very happy orchid, because that's how it's growing. I don't want these very long poles. I do want the orchid to be happy, but actually, and what I mean by happy is I mean staying upright, but I don't like the ugly sticks. So there we are. I'm going to take very carefully, making sure that I don't snip the orchid at the same time there. And just untwisting the rubber coated wire that's keeping it in place. I'll pop it back there for now, but actually I may not need that entirely, because I am now going to add in some sticks that I've actually put some moss balls onto, just to add a little bit of interest. And once I wiggle it through the moss, those are going into place. Now, if I just rotate these sticks nicely, see how they want to fit together. Let's take that off. There we go. Yep, do you know what? I don't think I need that stick whatsoever. How would it be if we were to take it around the back? There. That's because we've got a nice little loop of the sticks coming together there. That's just adding a little bit of interest. And just with a little bit of wire, I can bind them together so they don't move. Let's have you, there we go. Going back to get the original rubber tie, because that's really kind to the stems of the orchids. Take that one right down. I'm going to leave the one on because it's going to help it sit a bit more securely on our sphere. Yep. But I think we are nearly there. Obviously, each orchid is completely individual. Each orchid is going to be going its own way and doing its own thing. And that's part of the beauty of it. So whilst you may normally be arranging flowers, I thought this idea perhaps gave you something perhaps to arrange that was a little bit different, but that also would last for a long time. And if we just turn our attention to the caring of it for a moment, one great tip, obviously you could get your spray and spray it every so often, or now and then put an ice cube onto the moss, which again will filter down to the sphere and just keep that sphere nice and moist. And I hope you like that. I hope that's an idea that perhaps you think that you could have a go at yourself. These are elder branches, but you could get hold of a few branches, I'm sure. This is going to sit now on my sideboard by my TV, and I'm going to enjoy it. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you might give it a go yourself. Goodbye.